Hey there, and welcome back in to the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. My name is Sam Hind, and wow, are you in for a treat today? I have had the absolute pleasure of listening in and chatting away with the amazing Oscar Trimboli. Now, Oscar is a listening expert, and he's going to share some of his wisdom with us today to help us to better understand our customers, to build relationships with our customers, and to listen in. He's going to share with us his quest, his mission, and he's going to tell us a little bit about how we can all be better listeners at home, in life, and in our business. So all I can say is listen in, because you're in for an awesome ride today. So welcome back, everybody, to the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. I am really excited about this interview today. I have got a very, very special guest with me, Oscar Trimboli. Now, did I say your last name right, Oscar? Brilliant. Now, here's the thing. I'm a bit nervous about this one. I'll tell you why. I'm very, very used to talking. You all know this. You have been to our workshops. You've seen our webinars. You've seen our podcast. Talking is what I know how to do. But Oscar is the deep listening expert, and he's going to come in today. I'm really excited with some of the wisdom I know he's going to share with you. Well, I've had the pleasure of listening to Oscar before, and I think this is going to be a real game changer for lots of you and a real left turn from what we normally do. So welcome on in, Oscar. Thank you so much for joining us today.
G'day, Sam. Looking forward to listening to your questions today.
So, Oscar, we've had a little bit of a debrief and a bit of a chat about our beautiful audience, our listeners. And one of the things that I know we absolutely have a bit of a struggle with is the listening side of things. We're always very ready to jump into the doing. And I just want to, first of all, maybe if you could tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do to give our listeners today a little bit of a background information into who Oscar is. And then I'm going to dive in. I've got some questions for you for sure today.
Thanks, Sam. I am a corporate refugee. I was in a boardroom at Microsoft, and my vice president said to me halfway through the meeting, Oscar, you need to stay behind immediately after the meeting. And the only thing that was going through my head for the rest of this budget meeting with 18 people across Singapore, Sydney, and Seattle was, how many weeks' salary have I got left? Because I'm certainly about to be fired. And at the end of the meeting, Tracy looked me straight in the eye and said, please close the door when everybody leaves and come and sit here. She asked me to sit down right next to her. She looked me straight in the eye and she said, you don't even know what you've done. And the only thing I could think, Sam, is I'm getting fired for something I didn't know I did. Mm-hmm. She said, Oscar, at the 20-minute mark, you completely changed the trajectory of this meeting because of the way you listened. If you could code the way you listen, you could change the world. Sam, what she said was so profound. The only thing I was thinking was, yay, I'm not getting fired. Or I was putting all that money back in the bank account that I'd taken out over the previous 40 minutes. And all I could say to Tracy, because I was working at Microsoft as a marketing director at the time, was, like, Tracy, do you mean code or code? And even the words didn't make any sense. She said, code, Oscar, code it into software. Well, I skipped out of that meeting so excited and never thought another word of being able to code the world to listen, and had to go out and work with my sales organization to deliver on this $1 billion budget we'd just been given. And 7 weeks later, our finance person said, Oscar, can you come to the budget setting meeting and audit my listening? I said, wow. Brian, I haven't got any time for this listening caper. I got to go and work with Gary. I got to go and work with Lisa. I got to go and work with Juliana to deliver the sales number. And they're not happy with the number we got. He said, Oscar, let me make it simple. It wasn't a request. Come and audit my listening. And for the first time in my life, I had to sit down and think about the way I listened and had a look at Brian. And now I'm on a quest to create 100 million deep listeners in the world. because somebody challenged me to go, if you can achieve it in your lifetime, it's probably not ambitious enough. So here I am on a podcast with you, Sam, talking about listening. And when I'm not doing that, I'm running and swimming and spending time with the grandkids playing Lego.
Awesome. I love that story. And I think the thing that popped out for me with that was about the fact that you didn't sort of step out one day and go, this is what I'm going to do. You listened to what someone said to you and thought, hey, I probably should do something with this. So, Oscar, how did that?
I wasn't that smart. Tracy had to tell me, and then I said no to Brian, and Brian told me I had to. And whether I've written a book or even, for 2 years, I was writing newsletters about listening. And then somebody said to me, Dermot, thank you. He said, Oscar, if your stuff is all about listening, why wouldn't you do a podcast? And I thought, it's so obvious. But for 2 years, I'm writing a newsletter. And then somebody asked me to write a book. And then somebody asked me to put the stuff I was doing into playing cards. And then somebody said, why can't we do an online quiz? Everything that's become a product has been a result of listening not so well, but listening mainly well to what my clients ask me to do. And I think sometimes we're probably too much in our own head. Mm-hmm. And listening happens outside your eyes. If you're listening inside your eyes in your own mind, you're probably going to get in your own way. But if you can step out the other side and be on their side of the table. We have this really fun jigsaw puzzle game that we play with some corporates. So we give them a jigsaw puzzle and two people have to put it together. The teams that always win the most is you have somebody constructing the jigsaw puzzle and somebody giving them instructions, Sam. Yep. The teams that always win are the teams where the instructor stands directly behind the person constructing the jigsaw puzzle so they can see what they're trying to do rather than being on the side.
Yep.
And for a lot of us, all our listening is done at the side rather than listening for where the people really are at.
Yeah.
A lot of us turn up with our agenda, and we don't turn up with an agenda that simply says, what will make this a great conversation, discussion for you? And if you do, they'll let you talk about your stuff, but let them talk about their stuff first, because they want you to be part of their world. And I'm sure you've talked about know, like, and trust. And
yes, we repeat that one an awful lot.
And the fastest way to know, like, and trust is questions and listening.
Yeah.
And although communication is 50% speaking and 50% listening, only 2% of us have ever been taught how to listen. We weren't taught it at school. We definitely not taught it in the workplace. And for many of us, go back to your school day, Sam. I want you to do this exercise with everybody who's listening to us right now.
Okay.
Go back to school. Think about the teacher who had the biggest impact on you.
Oh, good or bad, does it matter?
The teacher that has the best impact on you. Yes. The teacher who could see your potential, your possibilities. The teacher who could see beyond the facade you were trying to project as a student. The teacher who could listen beyond the words and believed in you. And you still remember them today. I guarantee you that's the teacher who listened best to you.
Yep.
Not the teacher who taught you something, but the teacher who listened to you, because they could see what you were about. They could see beyond the poor word choices you were using at the time to explain what you're trying to do. And they could see possibilities in you that you couldn't even see in yourself. And I think for a lot of us, when we turn up to prospecting meetings with customers, if we turn up with a mindset of how can we see the best possibilities in this person rather than objections, we'll create an experience that will fast track the know, like, and trust for them straight away.
Yeah, right.
Yet most of us turn up to a conversation with a radio station playing in our head that's about what we want to achieve in this meeting, what we didn't achieve in this meeting, what could the possible objections be? And people say that you should focus on the person who's speaking to start your listening, and it's the wrong place to start. Listening should not start with the speaker. Your listening should actually start with you
Okay.
Because too many of us have this story playing in our head about the conversation we're just about to walk into.
Yeah.
Oh, they're going to say no. Oh, and if they say no, they'll never be my friend again. Or if they say no and they'll never be my friend again, they might badmouth me to my other friends in my network or in my family even.
Mm-hmm.
Listening starts with you. And if you can get you ready to listen, then listening to them becomes much easier. And the first thing you want to do to be available and present. Here's 3 really practical tips for all of us when it comes to listening. These will be really easy to say, but they'll be very hard to practice. So tip number 1, switch your notifications on your mobile phone off.
Ooh, good one. Yep, I like it.
Put your mobile phone in your bag, out of sight, definitely not on the table.
Yep.
Now, for a lot of you listening, I just sound like the drug dealer who took away your drugs because you're so addicted to the red dots, the beeps, the buzzes, the dings on your phone. And they're not going to be helpful in the conversation.
Yep.
We need to know how to bring our attention to the conversation. So tip number 1, switch your notifications off. If you're crazy brave like me, you can just switch the phone off. Sam just had a moment, everyone. If you're listening on audio only, she just had a moment.
These guys know. They know how hard I try to disconnect from technology, but I don't remember the last time I turned my phone off. Keep going, Oscar. I can handle it.
Can you?
I can.
Can you switch your phone off now, Sam?
Oh, I didn't say that. I said keep going. Let's be real here.
Tip number 2. Drink a glass of water every 30 minutes and drink a glass of water just before you go into the conversation. A hydrated brain is a listening brain. Our brain is 5% of our body, yet it consumes 26% of blood sugars. So the best way to get blood sugars to the brain, to drink water. By the way, if you drink coffee, you're going to have to drink an extra glass of water for every cup of coffee you have as well.
I've heard you say this one, not the coffee part, that's new. But I'd heard you talk about water the last time I heard you speak. And you know what I did? I went straight out. I bought myself another drink bottle. Do you like that? I need a drink.
Beautiful. It says I need a drink. Yeah.
It says I need a drink. And I have been consciously, before I go into a meeting, having, because I can see on the back of it my how much I've had to drink. So I'm consciously drinking a glass's worth before I go into a meeting. And I have noticed a massive, massive difference, although I do drink a bit of coffee and I haven't increased my intake. So I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that part. I love that.
Should we just put that there? Now, what's different for you, Sam? What do you notice? You said, I've noticed a difference. What's different for you by drinking water?
So my attention span has definitely improved, and my ability to sit and concentrate and listen has definitely improved. But when you spend a lot of time in front of a screen, which I do, it's a natural part of my job, and for a lot of us, we're doing our meetings by Zoom at the moment. So I actually find that has a much more, like I'm coming out of meetings exhausted. My eyes are tired. Everything's tired. But if I am staying well hydrated, which is easy to forget to do, especially when you're stuck in the one spot and you're not getting up and moving around so much, I'm definitely noticing that I'm able to focus visually as well as mentally in the meetings. So yeah, big difference there.
Lots of science behind it. And look, depending on the size of your kidney, it could be a bad thing, right? But it also gives you another way to short circuit a very long meeting by having a little pit stop. So tip number 1, switch off your notifications on your mobile phone. Tip number 2, drink a glass of water every 30 minutes. And then tip number 3, the deeper you breathe, the deeper you listen. So again, before the conversation, just take 3 deep breaths. And there is a correct way to breathe. Most people don't realize this. In through the nose, all the way down to the bottom of your diaphragm. And I've interviewed a lot of vocal coaches. They say all the way down to the bottom of your glutes. If you really want to imagine it. Apparently Dame Joan Sutherland, the very famous Australian opera singer, was famous for breathing all the way down to her glutes.
Okay.
The glutes are your backside muscles, if you don't know what the glutes are. Then out through the mouth. So in through the nose, all the way down, and then out through the mouth. And it should take, done well, about 15 seconds. Nobody should notice that you're doing it. In a meeting, if you get knocked off course, they say something that's unexpected, or you're just a bit worried that the conversation isn't going the way you expect, again, just take a deep breath in, hold it for 5 seconds, and let it out. An oxygenated brain is a listening brain. So listening happens in the front of the brain, the modern part of the brain. And the part of the brain that's telling you to be worried, to anticipate anxiety or fear or frustration, is coming from the most primitive part of your brain, the part of your brain that's connected to your spine, the one that says run really fast because there's a saber-toothed tiger coming to eat us all up.
Yep.
So those 3 tips will get you ready to listen. We haven't even turned up to the conversation, but just like a gym, you're not going to go to the gym with the wrong clothes, with no warm-up, and you don't know how to use the equipment. So we're showing you how to use the equipment, how to warm up, how to get ready to listen. Now, this is where most people start to think about listening. But if you get those foundations in place, easy to say, notifications off, drink water, 3 deep breaths, hard to practice. But if you do, we know from our database of 1,400 listeners that we track out of 7,500 people who've taken our quiz, the number one thing that improves their listening, the one that if they do it, their listening goes up, and if they don't, it goes down, is switching off the notifications on your phone.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense.
Now, for Zoomers like you, Sam, same thing is true. If you've got all kinds of tech on your desktop happening, you got to switch off the notifications. You've got to switch off the email notifications, the WhatsApp application, whatever is beeping at you. Same thing is true if you're sitting at your desk. So with that in place, we might move on to chat about the conversation about how to turn up and listen to somebody else, because most people skip the step we've just done. And if you do, you're ahead of 95% of people when it comes to listening if you just practice those 3 steps. So I'm curious what questions are on your mind, Sam.
Oh, well, I've got a few, and there's a few things that you said earlier on, Oscar, that I just want to come back to for a moment. One of the very first jobs I ever had was actually door-to-door selling. And I've told this story a couple of times inside of our trainings. And we were taught to sell. The first thing they taught us was how to sell, how to close the sale, how to talk about the product. But what they didn't tell us how to do was listen. Now, accidentally, it was a lesson I learned really quickly by getting a lot of doors slammed in my face. And what I discovered was when I approached a new person for the very first time, I had around about 7 seconds to get their attention before they made a decision to boot me out or hear me out, one or the other. And what I learned was, and again, through a lot of doors being slammed in my face, was the way to get them to hear me out rather than boot me out was to get them talking about themselves. So the way to get them to do that was to ask the right questions at the right time and listen. Now, if I did that, I had all the time in the world to sell to these guys. But if I didn't do that successfully, I was booted back out again. Now, where this has become really handy over the years is one of the things that we try to teach people, we successfully teach people, is that when you haven't got a yes from your customer yet, when you haven't got, a connection with a new customer, the relationship isn't quite there yet, it's usually because you haven't asked the right question yet. And so one of the tools I had in my tool belt that I've always used has been to, if I've still got an objection there, I need to ask another question. And sometimes you don't know what the right question is to ask. So I'm really excited to hear some of your advice in this space. But I also just want to, and I'll come back to that, but I just want to remind people of why I wanted to pull you in here today. Because a few people might be listening to this going, this is fantastic. This Oscar guy sounds pretty great. And this listening thing sounds really useful, but how is it going to help me in my direct selling business? And I just want to come back a little moment and the reason I pulled you in, Oscar, and I wanted to have this conversation with you is because I think one of the great and most valuable things we can do in our direct selling businesses is to be listening and learning about our ideal customers. Challenges on social media, we're so programmed to be broadcasting, to be telling people things, that we don't take the time to stop and listen using social media. It's not always about talking and listening. Sometimes it's also about posting and listening. And I think that both of those things are really important for our direct sellers to be doing, to get to know their ideal customer, to be able to connect with them, communicate with them, and build that relationship so that they like, know, and trust you. So back to my question, and I might be jumping ahead a little bit here, but I'm very excited to hear from you a little bit about the questioning process. So when people are thinking about how can I better get to know my ideal customer and make them feel heard, to listen to them, to get to know them, to build the relationship, what are some useful questions I could ask to help me do all of that?
So questions come in hierarchies, meaning some questions yield higher returns than others. So we put them in categories. We think about the why question, think about the how question, think about the what, the where, and the who question. When you're early in a relationship with somebody, you don't know them so well, you don't have any history, please avoid using why questions early on.
Yep.
Now, whether I talk to FBI hostage negotiators or whether I talk to telephone-based suicide counselors, they all give me this advice. And the reason is people get triggered right back into their childhood when their parents said, why did you do that? Subconsciously, when you ask a why question, people are feeling judged. So you want to, early on, you want to ask how-based questions or what-based questions. You know, what can I cover off for you today? How would this be a good use of our time? How would you like to allocate our time during our conversation today? So the first thing is to think about when we're opening up the discussion, we want to explore rather than discover. And the questions that yield the best returns in exploration are what and how questions. Now, as you move further into the discussion, you want to ask a few more where, when, and who questions.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where you move into the objection handling part of a conversation as an example. And then maybe in the second or third meeting, you might ask some why-based questions. Flipping it around as well, you can use social media really cleverly when you do a post. Questions will yield you typically 10 times higher engagement than a post that's a broadcast. You know,
absolutely.
An announcement. So in my corporate work, we've actually analyzed a whole bunch of social media inside corporations, and we advise senior leaders there that, again, how, what-based questions in the social media posts will yield you 10x to 15x higher engagement from the people that you're engaging with. So you can be quite strategic around a product you want to promote and just ask an obvious question. And the obvious question might be, this product can be used for this. What other uses could you imagine for this product besides the obvious? And you can just have fun with that.
Yep.
You could ask a simple question like, hey, tag who you think would benefit from this product. It's a really simple question. It's an easy engagement technique. And a lot of us don't think that social media is the ultimate listening platform. I surf hashtags to anticipate presentations I'm making. So Sam, I'm presenting to 250 of the highest performing hairdressers in Australia in the next month. Now, if you can see this on video, you are laughing your head off because my hairstyle is,
same as my husband's, Oscar. It's the best hairstyle there is. Do you know, someone said the other day, it's you guys are closer to God, you've got less of a barrier.
Well, given how short I am, I'm not sure how close to God I am. I'm probably closer to Yoda than I am to God.
I can see him.
So Sam, I've been following hairdresser hashtags for the last 2 months, and I've had a fascinating time because it's not a group of people that I would naturally engage with. I've interviewed some friends, hairdressers, but one story that struck out for me was a story of Mary, and Mary posted this on Twitter. And she wanted to do a shout out to her hairdresser, and her hairdresser had come to see her the day before her first chemotherapy because she had breast cancer. And Mary did a shout out for her hairdresser because her hairdresser had come there with scissors and a shaver to cut off all her hair, which women have a very different relationship with hair to men. It means so much more for a woman than it does for a man. And Mary wasn't sure, and her hairdresser went on to explain that if we start to cut your hair after you've had your treatment, it actually falls out in clumps and we can't use it for your wig. And the reason I'm here today is to collect your hair in its pristine condition so we can make a wig that's exactly like your hair. Now, Mary cried when her hairdresser said this. And for most of you listening, you're probably thinking that her hairdresser is a woman. But in fact, this was posted on Twitter with the hashtag straight male hairdresser. And Ariel not only listened to the fact that Mary had got breast cancer, he listened carefully enough to diarize when she was having her first treatment and turned up at her house and did that. Now, I can tell that story now to the hairdressing community that I'll be presenting to because I'm listening on their hashtags. For a lot of us, we should be listening for problems on social media, not just necessarily hashtags, because problems are great indicators of selling opportunities. I have a simple philosophy. I love sellers because they're problem-solving machines. That's all they do. They seek out the other person's problem and they exchange money in that case. And what Ariel was doing there was making a much bigger impact. And I am sure, because I know how big Mary's social media following is, he probably picked up a lot of clients as a result of this as well.
Yep.
How well are you listening to your clients? How well are you listening to your prospects? Are you listening to the fact that they've got breast cancer, or are you listening to they've got breast cancer, what it means for them, and the first day of their treatment? Too many of us listen to what people say rather than what they mean. And I want to just give a little bit of science here, Sam. The science is really simple. If we understand the science of speaking, you will understand the science of listening. So when I speak about 125 words per minute, when Sam speaks about 160 words per minute, she speaks just above average speed. But Sam thinks at anywhere between 900 words per minute and 1,600 words per minute. So Sam is thinking 11 times faster than what she can possibly speak at. So the likelihood that the first thing somebody says is what they actually mean to say is 11%. Now, is it any wonder we get conversations that kind of rub people up the wrong way, or we have a bit of tension and conflict in a conversation when we're both having a dialogue about 11% of what we think? And that just means ask the next question. Ask the next question. You know, if they give you a price objection, it's not a price objection, it's a value question.
So true. I'm so glad you've gone here because this is really powerful stuff, guys.
So the second question isn't to say, you know, that's our price. That's not going to be useful. Pose a question about what value they need to see for you and them to move into an exchange. So in that moment, while you're listening, you can very quickly start to understand what's valuable for them and then go back into your product training and showcase a product benefit, not a feature, but a benefit that is relevant to that. But if you're just answering the objection with the very first question they throw back at you or the very first response, that is not their real objection because they're telling you what they're saying, not what they're meaning.
Absolutely.
And if you can hear and listen for the change in their breath, that's when you know what they're about to say is what they mean. They'll go, or they'll use this phrase. Listen for this one. They will say the word actually. Listen out for actually. And they'll say a phrase like, what's important to me is. Now, when you start to hear them breathe out, say the word actually, or say what's important to me, you are getting to what they mean, not what they say.
That's
and
awesome.
you will quickly get to a point that becomes really simple for you. Thanks for your time. It doesn't seem like we're a great match. Who can you recommend me to who would be a great user of this product? Or never leave without asking for a referral. Or you go and have the conversation and figure out how to transact. But listen to what they mean, not what they say. The first thing that comes out of their mouth, Sam, I guarantee you is not what they mean.
Yep. And I love that you've gone there, Oscar, because this is really powerful stuff. And again, not a lot of the people that we're speaking to, a lot of our listeners today are not people that have got a lot of experience in sales. They're also people that feel uncomfortable in most of the cases when it comes to selling. And it's because they're doing what they think they're meant to be doing rather than that relationship building side of things. So I really love that because I know how powerful asking questions can be. And like I said to you earlier, my philosophy when I was, back in my corporate role and I was selling a concept to potential new clients was always, if I get another objection, I need to ask another question. And what does the objection really mean? And it used to come down to 4 key things. But usually what they were saying was, because your gut instinct is to go straight in and fix it. So as soon as they say, I don't think I can see a use for that Thermomix in my house, the first thing we want to do is convince them that they're wrong. But in actual fact, there's an objection lurking in there somewhere, and we just need to work out what it is by asking the right questions. Sometimes we don't know what they are. Sometimes it's about asking enough questions till our brain tweaks in and goes, that's it. That's what I need to ask. I think I've worked it out. And you'll know when you start doing this, you'll start to see a little bit of ground moving. It'll become that little bit easier. So I really love that you've gone there. That's awesome, Oscar. And I think there's so much in this space that we can all learn from you with that. I do just want to come back for a little moment, though, to in-person events. So you've spoken a little bit about the importance of social media. Love that you touched on engagement questions. It's one of the things we spend a lot of time on. Very powerful. But now when it comes to in-person events, for those that are doing demonstrations, maybe as network marketers or those that are in party plan, often what's happening is they are meeting people for the very, very first time in a group scenario, and they're needing to do their presentation, but they're also having to listen to and connect with everyone in the room. Mm-hmm. Now, ordinarily, in a scenario like this, we've got, say, between 2 and 8 people would be, we're not talking massive groups, but I'd love to ask you, what are some tips you can give for people that are entering someone's home or going onto a Zoom to do one of these events to help them to ask the right questions, but also to listen to each person individually and get the best outcome they can in those situations, rather than spending the whole time constantly selling the same way to everyone, because everyone needs something a little bit different from us.
Well, let's just go with Zoom. You've got to start off again by engaging in questions. So for me, I always instruct the leaders and people I work with is that the first question in Zoom needs to be the intersection of what's relevant for you and them. So it can't be, hey, tell us where you're dialing in from. Who cares, right? That doesn't create a connection between me and you. Let's stay with Thermomix. What could you do with an extra 2 hours a day without cooking? Might be a great question to start off with. Who would you have over for your first meal with a Thermomix? You don't have to say names, but you could just say it could be family members, it could be friends or whatever. But can you see how those 2 questions are designed to connect straight away to the primary reason they think they're coming and the primary benefit you can provide? So those questions do a couple of things that you don't suspect. what it does is it allows anybody else who's on the Zoom to go, oh, wow, I didn't think of that. I wonder if she's going to cover that off today. Oh, I didn't think about that. I wonder if he's going to cover that off today. And if you can get the group not only to listen to you, but listen to each other, you've created a powerful kind of experience rather than just an education there. So make sure the question you open up with is relevant to the context that you're setting up. And if you were in that Thermomix example there, you might want to have some fun depending on your personality with the second question. What's the meal that challenges you the most? Well, what's the biggest cooking disaster you've ever had? Put it in the chat, right? And it just lightens it up, and you know where people are coming from that point on. Now, not everybody's going to go in the chat. Just keep that in mind as well. Don't cold call on them. It's just like, hey, Sam, you haven't put anything in the chat. We can't proceed until you put something in the chat. No. Just
I have seen that happen.
Yeah. And the selling number for that session was a round number.
Yeah.
Now, face to face, again, you just want to create connection while you're coming into the home, while you're doing the setup. You can ask those kinds of questions as well. You can simply ask those kinds of questions. Hey, today I'm doing a demonstration. Would you prefer me to do a dessert or a main? Right? That's a simple thing to do. I don't know what kind of things sit in your ingredient bag, but wouldn't it be great for the audience to feel like they were heard? Now, if you came into our house and did that, the answer would be dessert, 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 and dessert. And if it's not chocolate, we're not interested, right?
But can you see to the Thermomix consultants out there right now, you're about to get a whole load of emails in your inbox.
So, and Laura, my stepdaughter, is a huge Thermomix fan. She's had it for about 6 months. And the reason she bought a Thermomix is got nothing to do with cooking. It was about convenience. It was about time. It was about healthy meals for her kids. That was the reason she bought it. So when it comes to the face-to-face, you just start with a question that connects you and them straight away. And you can have fun. And be yourself, you go, I've got lots of oysters here today. Does anybody want an oyster recipe or whatever? It's just going to lighten the mood up and create some connection. I think the other thing there is think about the role of the host in that as well. The extent at which you can involve the host, if they can see a connection between you and the host, they're connected to the host. So be in a constant dialogue during a demonstration with the host, because that shows not only that you're listening, but the host is the proxy for everybody else who's there as well, because you don't know them, but you know the host. So again, a question that connects you on the host, and then a question that connects the host with the people they've invited there as well. A question that might connect you with the host is, I remember coming over to your house for your birthday. Do you remember that disaster cheesecake, or whatever the case may be? That's probably not going to create a connection around cooking, but it's definitely going to create a connection around we've all buggered up something when it comes to cooking. And then you could just say to the host, thinking about everybody here today, what kind of dinner party would you like to have with them? What would you theme it? And if the host doesn't know, you can just ask the audience. It might be a Hawaiian party. Who knows? It doesn't matter, but it will give you a conversation starter from that point on. So make sure that whatever questions you're asking, when you're forming those connections, create a connection between them and their problem and your purpose. If it's just about your purpose, they're just going to hear lots of
not much.
And I won't be tuning into you.
Yep. I love that. That's great. Now, Oscar, I'm very aware of time, and I think I could keep talking to you for another hour because I've got all of these questions that are rumbling around in my head right now. But probably the biggest one is I want to hear a little bit more about your mission. You mentioned it at the very start today, and I'd really love it if you can tell us a little bit more about that. What is it? And if everyone was listening, they might remember. But also, what is the motivation behind it? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, my quest started off with me going, by the time I leave this planet, I want to get to 100,000 deep listeners in the world. And my mentor at the time heard this and he said, add a zero, come back next month. And I scratched my head and I went, how am I going to do 1 million? Next month I came back, I'd figured it out and I kind of said, yeah, Matt, I can do 1 million deep listeners before I leave this planet. He says, great, Oscar, add a zero, come back next month. And I just went, oh, come on. Are we going to do this every month? And he said, Oscar, here's a dirty little secret. And the way he said it was like that. So I had to kind of lean in and listen a little bit more. He said, if you can achieve your goal in your lifetime, it's not ambitious enough.
I love it. Gosh,
so
I came back to the drawing board.
So I came back next month and said 100 million deep listeners in the world. And Matt said, that is so doable. And you realize it's only 2% of the Earth's population. And I said, until I can figure out 100 million, that's what it is. And whether it's families, whether it's workplaces, whether it's friendships, whether it's communities, whether it's economies, whether it's political systems, or whether it's the planet, I'm yet to meet a person who can tell me about a problem that couldn't be solved with a little bit more listening. So my wish for Ruby, Paige, Xander, and Sebastian, my 4 grandkids, is that they inherit an earth where people just take a little bit more time to listen to each other. And I heard a great story that said, if you want world peace, go and have peace at home. Stop trying to bring peace to the world. So for me, that's what I try and do. One person at a time, one listener at a time. We will get there.
I love that. That's so powerful, Oscar. And I think they're just in that, that little, for me, that's really inspiring. And I think it's probably got a lot of people out there thinking right now, not only about what's their quest. I know you used the word quest just then, what's their mission, but also I just think that's really powerful that listening can do so much. Now, I think there's so much more that we can learn from you. And there's probably a few people out there going, Sam, we've only just touched the tip of the iceberg today, which I know we have. There's only so much we can cover in this short podcast. So if people would love to do a little bit more learning about listening with you, how can they go about doing that? What's the next step? Because I know there is a little quiz out there that they can complete to help them understand a bit more about their listening style.
Well, let's live the dream. Let's practice what we teach rather than only talk about the listening quiz. I'd love to come back and do another one of these, only if you send some questions to Sam, and we'll answer all your listening questions in the next episode. So email, DM Sam all your listening questions. You might go, hey, didn't explain that too well. Can we go a little bit deeper on this? Or my situation's different. You go as detailed as you want in the question. Imagine it's just a personal consultation between you and me on unlocking your listening superpowers. If you want to discover what gets in your way before then you can take the 7-minute listening quiz at listeningquiz.com, and you'll get a personalized report that'll explain to you who your listening villain is, but more importantly, a 3-step action plan with what to do about it as well. So visit listeningquiz.com to get behind your listening and start to listen from outside your head rather than inside your head.
That's fantastic. So we'll share that in the podcast notes, but I really appreciate that offer. I think that's fantastic, Oscar. So if you guys listening today would like to hear again from Oscar and perhaps have some of your questions answered, flick them through to me. We'll pop our contact details in the show notes. I just want to say one little thing about that quiz before we wrap up though, Oscar. As soon as we heard you present, my husband was with me. So all of our listeners know Greg. He sometimes jumps into our podcasts as well. Greg and I jumped in and did your little quiz. And then I get this phone call from him about half an hour later. And he said, Sam, I don't like the results I got. Can you read them and tell me if they're right? Because if they're not, I'm going to go back and do it again because I just don't like what it said. And I think that probably means it was bang on. Would that be fair to say?
Well, was it bang on, Sam? You would know better than me.
I think if something challenges you like that, it usually means you need to pay a bit of attention. But
most people say it's spookily correct and accurate.
It was. I will give it to you. It was very correct. So, look, Oscar, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. This has been really eye-opening for me, and so I can imagine our listeners right now are going, "Wow, okay, this is giving me some things I can go and do, even if it's just drinking the water or turning the notifications off." One of the key things here is that there are some little steps you can take that are totally doable that actually help you in this space. So I'm really excited to get people's feedback. I can't wait to see some questions coming in, but thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure and a privilege to have you join us on the podcast. So thank you for your time.
Thanks for listening, Sam.
Such a pleasure. All right, we will pop all of that information in the show notes for you all. We'll wrap up here. But again, thank you so much, Oscar. God bless to all of you guys and have a really awesome week. Thanks again.